You're listening to The Real Well Show with Kathy Fettke, the real estate investor's resource.
Will new home builders flood the market like they did in 2006? Or will we continue to see a lack of inventory moving forward? What about baby boomers? When they die, will they leave too many homes on the market? Millions are expected to pass away over the next 10 years. And will millennials take their place and be renting or buying homes? We'll be answering all these questions and more here on The Real Well Show. Welcome, I'm Kathy Fettke, and today I am thrilled to have John Burns, the founder of John Burns Real Estate Consulting, joining us today on The Real Well Show. I've been trying to get him here for a long time. His team offers thorough research for building industry executives and their investors. The company analyzes housing cycles, home buyer and renter demand, and I personally have been following him for years. In fact, back in 2006, John and John Burns Real Estate Consulting was one of the reasons we stayed out of bubble markets and could recognize them. His data helped us to see that permits were not in line with job growth in a bunch of areas, and that overbuilding would create oversupply. He also helped us to see that areas like San Francisco, Las Vegas, and Phoenix were severely overvalued and in massive bubbles. So we were able to advise our listeners on The Real Well Show to stay away from those markets and save themselves from the subsequent crash. John's company's been consulting us on our Tampa project as well. We were able to buy 4,200 lots there. In 2012, we got that land for 10 cents on the dollar. It had been in escrow for $160 million in 2006. Of course, when the market crashed, that escrow didn't go through, and the owners watched their equity just crash along with the market. The project went into foreclosure and then back to the bank, and we were able to buy it as a network for $16 million. Again, just 10 cents on the dollar. And now we're super excited to announce that that project is going to be one of the first of its kind in the U.S. It's going to be a crystal lagoon. The original plan was for a golf course, but we decided that there's far too many golf courses already in Florida, and that's not really what the buyers want today. But meanwhile, I have John Burns here with us. He has just come out with a new book called Big Shifts Ahead, Demographic Clarity for Businesses. And I just can't wait to see what he thinks about today's market. So John, welcome to The Real Well Show. It's really an honor to have you here.
Thanks.
I'm curious if you think that we're looking at another, 2006.
I definitely don't think we're looking at another 2006. Hopefully those only come along once in a lifetime. The market is behaving more normal right now, which is a very different story by geography. So some of what you said about 2006 is very applicable, although really in 2006, you wanted to get out of every market.
Yeah.
Some clearly fared better than others, and Texas is one. The tech markets actually didn't get hit as hard during the Great Recession, and tech has been a strong rebounder economically. So San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, Denver, Austin, those markets have recovered so strong that we're putting those in the category of having a little too much froth right now. So we have a red flag in those markets. But in most of the country, the economy's holding up fine. Affordability is average or better than average if you look at it from a payment standpoint. There's very little construction going on almost everywhere, so the market's certainly not oversupplied like it was in 2006. And even the resale market is behaving with quite a bit of discipline right now. So the market looks fine to me.
Wow. Okay. I was just at IMN's Builder Conference in Las Vegas, and a big talk there was that, and I know you've talked about this too, that builder costs, permit costs, it's all become so much more expensive, 30% higher, that it's just getting tougher and tougher for builders to make a profit. And yet some were saying that they were seeing higher yields than they have in a while. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's all true. So when I was making those comments, I was talking about the overall housing market. One of the reasons the construction market isn't coming back so strong is builders are just having a tough time making normal margins. The government regulations have been piled on over the last 10 years. There was a speculative land price run-up in 2012 and 2013, and prices really haven't adjusted very much. The builders need some of those adjustments exactly because of what you just said. Their costs are going through the roof. So they're having a tough time finding a lot of opportunities to make a typical profit margin, and they're really short on labor right now. In fact, I was just looking at it. I think construction employment is up 4% year over year, which is one of the strongest sectors in the economy. But construction itself is up 6 to 7%, and so it's even a worse labor shortage situation today than it was a year ago.
Which is, interesting, and I don't mean to get political, but I will. A lot of the builders were very concerned that if Trump were to win and immigrants were sent away, that we'd have even a bigger problem there.
Well, there's no doubt that some of the most qualified, highly skilled laborers were from Mexico. In fact, we got a 2014 data point that there were 570,000 fewer Mexican-born construction workers in the U.S. in 2014 than in 2007. So they went somewhere. And it's been very difficult to attract labor at all, and particularly skilled labor back, no matter where they're coming from. You're exactly right. Now,
is it a problem of skilled labor, or is it a problem that people just don't want to work for those wages?
Well, I think it's both. So we actually, and I tell this to clients all the time, just step back and think about this. Working on a construction site, putting a roof on in Phoenix in 110 degrees is about one of the most difficult jobs there is physically.
Yeah.
And we were spoiled that we had these people willing to do this for a nominal wage. Mm-hmm. And if they're not there, we're going to be having to attract other people out of retail centers and other jobs to do this. They're going to command a much higher price. Mm-hmm. And that is what's going on. The labor that we're attracting back into the industry is more expensive, which is making it more challenging for the builders to build homes affordably.
Yeah, it makes sense. Now, some of the builders were saying that they much prefer the Tier 1 or A markets. What do they call it in the builder world? Is it A?
Yeah, a lot of people go markets, yeah.
Primary, okay. And what exactly is that? I mean, I imagine it's San Francisco, LA, Seattle, New York. How do you know it's an A market?
Yeah, I think those are the A markets for apartment developers.
Okay.
When the home builders are talking about A markets, they're really talking about the bigger construction markets, and more specifically, they're talking about close to the job centers in those markets. So in Phoenix, I want to be in Scottsdale, and I don't want to be in Casa Grande or Buckeye or some of the outlying areas. That's what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why construction's not coming back is where is the land? It's 50 miles from the major employment centers. Mm-hmm. So the builders have not gone there. They got burned there the most. Actually, a lot of the construction lenders don't want to lend there either. And the new young millennial buyer, if you will, is far less interested in having a long commute. So it's all coming together to see less construction in the country.
Okay, and so an A market could be in Houston, but it would be closer to town versus B would be out more in the suburbs. Okay, got it.
Yeah, like Katy, Texas, in the suburbs of Houston is definitely an A market, for example.
Okay, but further out would be B. Okay, I was trying to understand their thinking. And so many of the builders were saying they don't even want to touch C markets. And I thought they meant, I thought they were talking about Cleveland or Cincinnati or markets, tertiary markets. But are they just talking more exurbs?
They're talking more exurbs.
Okay.
Because in a downturn, you can't even get somebody to come look at a house in those areas.
Absolutely.
So that's why they're saying, I just don't want to take that risk. I'd much rather have a lower margin closer in than a normal margin in a place where I know I might get crushed.
So Stockton, not excited to build there?
Well, that's funny you mentioned Stockton. So there's a few exceptions in the market. And, Stockton's Lathrop, which is just next to Stockton, is an exception right now. There's actually a master plan there that's selling really, really well with a couple hundred homes a year called River Islands. I think the one thing that people are going to forget is that when their business can't grow at all and when the economy is totally strong, I think even though millennials are preferring not to commute, more and more of them are going to just because of the value proposition. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that in some of those tech markets like the Bay Area. So you brought up Stockton. I know Stockton is really far from the Bay Area. But we are seeing the outlying areas of the Bay Area sell well. And actually the same in Dallas. Mm-hmm. You go up to Frisco and Plano and further up that way, they're really hot markets. So I think that drive to you qualified buyer, if you will, is going to come back once a local economy is fully recovered. Mm-hmm. And most of the local economies, frankly, are not fully recovered yet. And that's part of the issue as well.
Yeah, that's a big issue. So, of course, at the conference, millennials were a big part of the conversation. And In my opinion, I represent a lot of people who like to buy older homes and make them new versus building, although we do both at Real Wealth Network. But, are millennials buyers or are they going to be renters for a while?
So we just published a book on this called Big Shifts Ahead, and the subtitle is Demographic Clarity for Businesses. So I'll make a little plug for the book here, but
Yes,
we've got
please.
a lot of analysis on this. And I want to break the millennials up into those born in the 1980s versus those born in the 1990s. Mark Zuckerberg is a millennial, and so is my daughter, who's a high school junior. So to have a conversation about the two of them and their friends is a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, those born in the 1980s have already formed 20 out of the 24 million households we think they're going to form. So they're out of the basement, they're away from mom and dad. They're not buying homes yet because they're actually getting married and having children 4 years later than their mom did or their parents did. So they're delaying some life milestones and they have student debt and all those sorts of things. But for the most part, they're out of the house and, hopefully they'll become homeowners as they start families. They were behind the big surge in growth in urban areas. There was 5 million more people in their 20s over the last 10 years. I know with certainty those 5 million extra people are going to be in their 30s over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think more and more of them are going to become homeowners, but we're pretty convinced they're going to not achieve the same home ownership rate as their parents. Going to the 90s group, and that 80s group, they're the ones that invented the sharing economy here. So there's a whole bunch of trends that they are doing that are going to make them more renters than homeowners. The 90s group, they're 16 to 25 today or 17 to 26, something like that. They're the ones that are still, by and large, living with mom and dad later in life. And because it's smart financially.
Yeah.
What was very unique about the baby boomers is they got the heck out of the house as soon as they graduated from high school and college. And there were a lot of jobs available to them at the time where they could do that. What's different about this group is good-paying jobs have not been available. I'm okay living with mom and dad. They're okay living with me. The smart thing to do financially, and since I'm not getting married and not having a child yet, is to live at home. So that's the big group that we think is going to drive a lot of household formations. But again, they're going to do it later than their parents did. And actually, I believe at a lesser rate than their parents, just because the economy has not been as cooperative.
Not my kids. They could not wait to get out on their own. I've got one at home still, but I have the rare millennial who's got a good job and is on her own for the most part. But yeah,
that's fantastic.
Okay, well, let's just use my daughter as an example. She's got a great job in Northern California, but she wants to be in a cool city like Seattle or Portland where there's a lot of young people, and she's looking for work up there. Are you seeing migration to certain cities that's attracting more of this age group, or are they just kind of spread out all over the place?
I've got a great statistic on that for you.
I bet you do. I can't wait to read your book.
So the migration data is pretty lousy. So we figured out if we just looked at the U-Haul's website and saw how much it was to take a truck to one city versus to take the same truck back, you could see where they were basically paying people to take the truck back. It is 7 times more expensive to take a U-Haul from San Francisco to Portland than to bring that same U-Haul back from Portland to San Francisco.
Oh my gosh.
Which just tells you there's so many more people getting out of San Francisco and going to Portland. They're basically paying people to drive the truck back for them.
Wow. Fascinating. Yeah. And U-Haul is a good one to use because that age group would be using U-Haul versus, one of the big van companies. Yeah.
Right.
Fascinating. Well, okay, my kid might, hey, if I were 24 years old, I'd go where all my friends are too. Fascinating. All right. Now we have, as I said, a large development, that Murata one, that's going to be the Crystal Lagoon, just an hour north of Tampa. And I looked online and there's another Crystal Lagoon coming out. It seems like there's a lot of inventory probably going to hit the market next year. Do you have any concerns that in some areas where it's taken a while to get the inventory online that we might see a little flooding of new homes at some point? And I didn't mean to use the word flooding in Florida. That was a bad use of it.
So from a pure number standpoint, the answer would be no, because there's still such little construction. But because we've seen so little construction for so many years, we've seen some pretty good home price appreciation, particularly in the new home market. So what I have seen in Orange County, California, where I live, is a prime example of that, where there's only, I want to say, maybe 6,000 or 7,000 single-family permits going on right now. but it was a 30% surge in the last year after prices ran up. So all those homes are priced around $1 million or more, and the market has softened. And you could see the same thing happen in Tampa, where somebody may have pushed prices by $50,000. Everybody did because it was so supply constrained. And then all of a sudden there's a surge at that higher price point. It can start to get a little competitive. Mm-hmm. So it's a very sub-market by sub-market analysis. Fortunately, we've got 17 offices around the country, so we help people with those things.
Well, I mean, the same issue in San Francisco and New York. The high end seems to have just been flooded with these condos, and right on time for a softening of the market there.
Isn't that always the case?
But you mentioned, listen, I had Harry Dent on the show, and he basically said the world is falling apart. And one of his big demographic concerns is that baby boomers are dying and going to be leaving about 10 million homes for sale over the next 10 years, and that will flood the market. Did you include that in your research?
Right. That was the case. That's no longer the case. So let me tell you what happened. So if you just look at births in the United States, which Harry does, we had the peak birth year in 1961, and then it plunged down into the late 70s, which created a huge boom and bust. However, what has happened was there were 3 immigration laws in the 1980s that basically opened the immigrant floodgates, and most of that bust has been filled in now by immigrants. So if you look at people in the United States today born in the 1970s, 23% of them were born in another country, by far the biggest percentage ever. And because people come here in their 20s and 30s, that's the age those people came here in the 1990s and 2000s. So it's a small decline, but it's not the big bust that would have happened if we hadn't opened the immigrant floodgates.
Fascinating. Okay, give us the name of your book again and where we can find it.
It's Big Shifts Ahead, and it's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all those places online. Big
Shifts Ahead by John Burns. Oh my goodness, it's just really an honor to have you here. I will see you in the next couple of weeks at the I Survived Real Estate event. Excited for that. Thank you for joining me here on The Real Wealth Show.
My pleasure, Kathy. Thank you.